Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Dr. Jeff Armstrong here with my co-host Corbin Bruton. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Lauryn Axelrod, an interfaith and interspiritual leader and the author of the forthcoming book, 10 Words, an interspiritual guide to becoming better people in a better world. Lauryn's work offers a refreshing approach to creating personal and societal change through practical, non-dogmatic exercises that merge ancient wisdom with modern science. As the world faces significant challenges, social, political, and personal, Lauryn's guidance provides a path to inner peace and community betterment. Join us as we explore how we can each make a difference, beginning with ourselves. Lauryn, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's just begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be on this path to finding peace, purpose, and connection.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor. I think I've been on this path my whole life, right? Trying to find peace, purpose, pleasure. Isn't that what we all want, right? Isn't that what we
Absolutely.
all want? My path took me down the spiritual route, right? I was fortunate in the sense that I grew up surrounded by spirituality. So I got the good stuff, right? I didn't get the hardcore religion. I got the good stuff. And I think I was just always curious. There's something more going on here than meets our eyes, right? Our ears, our minds. And spent my life really delving into that question of what's going on here.
What is going on here? What is it? So what do you mean by you grew up in the aspects of the spirit? What is it?
Well, so I was raised Jewish, but I went to Episcopal schools. And I was fortunate to have as a very early teacher an African-American woman who was the pastor of an evangelical, hallelujah, can I hear you say it, church. So, but it was at a time when ecumenism was very prevalent, right? So it wasn't hardcore religion in any of these. It was joy, it was connection, it was purpose, it was community. It was all of those things, right? So that's to answer that question. But as far as, what's going on here, if I had the answer, I would be happy to share it, but I don't. I just have the questions. And I rest in that place of, I don't know, but I'm going to keep asking.
Well, here's a question you might know the answer to. Lauryn, how do you define aging well?
Aging well is exactly that. Peace, purpose, joy, health, right? We need our health. We need our sense of connection. I'm also a hospice chaplain, so I see people at the end of their lives. And what I've learned is that to age well is to stay connected, is to stay in that wow, right? To stay in the wow of being alive. And that's a spiritual place, right? Because to be alive, what crazy miracle is this? Isn't this incredible? And I have a patient who's 104.
Oh, wow.
She's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing. And every time I see her, which is every week, right? She greets me with this, wow, you're here. And wow, let's talk about tennis or hot dogs or the birds or flowers, right? She's still engaged. And I think aging well is about remaining engaged with this thing called life. And that's all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, staying engaged with it.
So that is our definition of aging well too, I believe. And so you've mentioned you've had this interspiritual path your whole life. What inspired you to simplify the wisdom from all these different spiritual traditions into this practical 10-word guide?
Well, after decades of searching and seeking and being deeply involved in a number of different traditions from, the Abrahamic traditions, the Western traditions, and the Eastern traditions, as well as indigenous traditions, I found that I had a whole lot of practices and I had a whole lot of knowledge, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And what I was seeking was not so much doctrine from one tradition or another, but what is it underneath it that is common to all traditions, all faith and wisdom traditions, as well as what we've known, what we've learned with modern science and psychology, like that's relevant. So what are the common principles? So I went digging and I looked for them. And I came up with 10 words that are the common principles for all of our faith and wisdom traditions. I really think of them as the universal laws, the universal ethics. Like if we do these things, we will become better people in a better world. We will live well. We will thrive. We will support one another. We'll live in a world that supports all beings to thrive.
So quickly summarize for our listeners, what are the 10 words and how did you come to those 10 words?
So the 10 words, they all begin with A, B, and C, right? They're that foundational. The first word is attention, because you're not going to go anywhere if you're not paying attention. And what's interesting is a lot of modern spirituality stops there. Mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is just the first step. Where is your attention, right? And that attention is the through line. That's why it's the first word. So attention, acceptance, authenticity, benevolence, balance, contemplation, creativity, collaboration, celebration, and care.
And I really like how the first 5 words tend to be more about being, and then the last 5 words are more about behaving.
You got it. You got it. That's exactly it, right? Is that we have to cultivate this inner part of ourselves, right? In those first 5 words. Contemplation is the fulcrum. It's where you go from inner to a bigger picture, right? And then the last 4 words are how, once we've cultivated these qualities in ourselves, these principles, they can show up out in the world. So it's really about a relationship. It's inner and outer. And it's, what's interesting about these words that is different than, say, like the 10 Commandments or the Eightfold Path or various precepts or things in different traditions, is that they're not separate. Because what you find is you're not going to be able to do benevolence without acceptance. So by the time you get to care, which is the last word, and care means to attend to, right? To give a specific kind of attention to. You've come full circle. So they're all connected. And that's what's so beautiful about it, is that it actually is a complete path. It's not just a separate thing of like, thou shalt not, and they're not thou shalt nots and they're not thou shalts. They're questions. How does acceptance show up in my life? What does it mean to me? How can I cultivate that? How can I practice that? So it's just a question. It's not a thou shalt.
Let's dive a little deeper into that. Could you share some examples of the core principles and how you specifically apply them to your life?
Well, let's just start with attention. Let's
Okay.
always start with the first
All
one,
right.
right? So here is where our practices of mindfulness do come in, right? Is I personally spend time every day, even if it's just for a few minutes, just dropping down, dropping out, letting my mind come into the present moment, right? So that's a simple practice. A couple of minutes. Where are you? I like to say you need to be where your hands are, right? You need to be where your hands are. Because if you're doing something and your mind is elsewhere, you're not present to what's happening.
Like talking with your hands is how people engage with each other.
Yeah, where your hands are, right? So that's a practice. That's just an everyday practice. acceptance. There's a constant practice, especially these days, right? We have a lot that we have to work on accepting, right? And that's constantly like, am I judging? Am I making a distinction between what's good and what's bad based on whatever concepts or ideas or beliefs I might have? And that includes about myself, right? I have to spend time going, am I judging myself? Am I beating myself up? Or can I accept myself in my fullness? And some days it's great and some days it's not so great, right? Some days we're just having a bad day and that's okay, right? So going through benevolence, right? Benevolence really means well-wishing. So am I able to practice benevolence even when it's just like, I don't like this, or I don't like this person, or I don't like what's going on? We have to be kind. It's the principle of kindness. That's all it is. Right? So a practice for that is when you catch yourself going, can you drop down? Just what kind thing can you do right now? And a lot of these practices are always about the right now. That's why attention's important, right? Right now, not down the line, not yesterday, not, it's right now. What can I do right now in this moment? Balance, right? We're always somewhere on this spectrum of balance, and balance shows up in all different ways, especially as we're aging, right? Especially as we're aging, we need to bring that principle of balance in, but also balance in, it might be in our work life, our work home life. It might be in how much media we're consuming. Might need to pull back. It might be in the way that we relate to the natural world, our consumption patterns. Balance shows up everywhere. Contemplation, which is really one of my favorites, is taking those moments to just get quiet, right? To get quiet so you can hear. It's so noisy out there, and it's so noisy in here, right? That sometimes we just have to get quiet so that we can hear what's true and what's real and turn our attention to that, as I said at the beginning, that mystery. That question, what is going on here? I don't know, but I'm going to listen. I'm going to get quiet and I'm going to listen. Creativity, every breath we take is creative. And that understanding that it's not just making art. That's not where creativity is. Doing a podcast, creating a podcast is a creative act. Cooking dinner is a creative act. Everything we do that brings something into the world that didn't exist before is a creative act, and we are inherently creative. Collaboration, we go from the me to the we, right? How in this moment am I able to see the both and? The what's good for me is also good for you. And that's a natural principle. That's the way the universe works. It's very collaborative, right? Go into a forest, right? Forests are completely, everybody's working together there, right? That's how the world works. Celebration, joy, right? That remembering you're still breathing, you're here. Isn't this amazing? Being able to get down into that place of awe, of wonder, of magic, right? And celebrating, that's a practice of gratitude. And then care. In every moment, we can do something that takes care of someone or something else. Watering your house plants, feeding your cat, that's care, right? It can be that simple.
I don't know. Sometimes feeding the cat is more selfish for me than it is care. Our cat gets on me at 5:30 in the morning, just pounding on my chest, telling me to get up and feed her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But it's also an act of care that you do get up.
That's true. I don't just throw him off the bed.
Right. You could just go, I sympathize.
So with so much upheaval in today's world, particularly, in these last several years, how do these principles really help individuals navigate these challenging social and political landscapes that we're all in the midst of?
Mm.
Oh, yeah, that's such the question right now, right? It really is. And in many ways, that was also one of the impulses to develop these 10 words, which really just came as a group. And then I looked at them and I went, oh, wait a minute, there's something here, and then spent a year going through each word month by month, right? Um, I think that they are the answer in many ways, right? They are the way that we can get through chaotic times, and if we really look at, they're derived from sacred texts, which means that for millennia, we've been trying to figure out how to deal with change, how to deal with chaos, how to deal with things not being the way we want them. And each faith and wisdom tradition has had their ways, their suggestions, their ways for doing this. But this is how we swim in turbulent waters. We practice these things. We pay attention. We work on accepting. We may not like it. We may not like it. Division, chaos, violence. Nobody says you have to like it, but you still have to accept that it's happening. It is what it is, right? Practice kindness. Kindness is what helps us survive through things like this. Balance, getting quiet, contemplation, creativity. We need to make changes. We need to apply our creativity. We need to be, mindful of what it is we're bringing into the world. Always. Collaboration. We need to collaborate.
Just a little bit.
Just like, right? Celebration. We can still be grateful. We can still give thanks. We can still be in joy, even if there's chaos around us. And care. If we don't take care of the things we love, we don't have them. And even, people who are suffering, we need to take care of them too. We need to extend out. So I really do believe that these words are the path. I mean, they're not the path, okay? They're a path. They are a path. But they work, and they're easy.
I think they're, you can say they're the path, but there's many things on that path that, come together to bring us collectively to this direction that we're always, humans with consciousness and everything supposed to be evolving toward. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with saying it's the path, but understanding that there are many paths. We say the same
Absolutely.
thing with religion, right? But there are
Yep.
many paths.
There are many paths up the mountain, and the mountain is bigger than any path on it,
But the
right?
destination is the same.
Ultimately, and the destination is how can we be better people in a better world?
Yeah.
We've been trying to do it thousands of years, right? And sometimes we get it and sometimes we don't, but we've been taught how to do it.
So how do reflection and mindfulness contribute to the personal growth, and how do they incorporate into your book's teaching?
Well, I mean, both reflection and mindfulness are part of attention and contemplation, right? We need to be coming from a reflective, mindful place now. We can't flail around in anger and outrage and fear. We got to come back, right, to a quieter place where then our action moving forward has some grounding. It's grounded somewhere. It's not just, freaking out, they're the through line throughout the 10 words. That's why it's the first word, right? And the fulcrum, the middle word, they're the through line, but they're not the end, right? And that's what's really important. Like, again, in modern spirituality, we've got all this focus on mindfulness, 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 as though that is the whole point. It's the practice that takes us into everything else. You're not going to collaborate if you're not paying attention, if you're not mindful of your relationship to other people and other beings in the world around you. So they're the through line, but they're not the end point.
So my dad's a big fan of the comedian Emo Phillips. I don't know if you know who Emo is. One of his funniest bits was when he talks about this guy being on the Golden Gate Bridge, ready to jump, and he starts talking to him about God and faith and religion, and they find out they're the same. They're both Christian, and he starts going through, oh, what denomination? And he starts breaking it down further, and he finally gets down to like, I think it's like whatever, like synod or something like that of the church. And different, he says, heretic, and he pushes him off the bridge.
Right.
So
right.
In what ways can these teachings help us bridge these cultural and religious divides and foster a more united and understanding society?
Oh, that's so their goal, right? That's their
Yeah.
intention is, if we get caught up in doctrine and dogma and, who belongs to what and fighting over that, instead of looking at, underneath all of that, we're saying the same thing. We're all saying the same thing, which isn't to negate that there are, different perspectives. And that's fine. Have your perspective as long as your perspective, as long as your perspective isn't completely negating mine, right? And that's the beautiful thing about these words. You can actually go through them from the perspective of any one tradition because they're all there. You can look at them through Christianity. They're all there. You could look at them through Buddhism. They're all there. But if what we're trying to do is not separate ourselves, right? Not separate ourselves, but find that common ground. What do we have in common? Because we have to find that now. Otherwise we've just gone tribal and, we're gonna hurt each other really badly if we don't find the common ground. And these days, I hear, and it breaks my heart, I hear a lot of people saying, I can't find common ground with those people. Well, that's a failure of your imagination, It's a failure of your imagination because underneath it, we are human. And underneath it, we all want to live in a better world. We just have some different ideas of what that looks like. But I do think that we can find the common ground. And these principles, the 10 words, I believe can help us.
How do you decide on the specific of the 10 words in the book and and what makes each of them particularly transformative?
Well, like I said, when I sort of sat down, and this is, after years and years of study, I'm also an ordained interfaith minister, right? So years of study in all of these different traditions. And I sat down and said, okay, I need to find the common principles. And I just started writing. And by the time I got to care, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like the ones that encompass everything. People say sometimes, why isn't love one? I'm like, because love's in there. Love is the way that we define certain other actions. Benevolence, right? Care. Compassion is another one. Why isn't that there? It's in there, right? It's a way of that these words, these principles get expressed. They're transformative because they're really, on the surface, they're words we know. We already know what these words are. We just have forgotten or we're not paying attention deeply enough. Once you start working with the word, once you start saying, okay, let's say this week I'm going to work on balance, right? Which is one that I need this week. So this is my word this week is balance. Where, are you getting enough exercise? No, you've been sitting in front of the computer. That's why you're stressing, You need to get out. You need to go outside and take a walk, get into some balance. They transform you almost effortlessly when you just ask the question. And you keep asking the question and you keep asking. In the book, there are reflection questions for each word. Again, not by no means like comprehensive, but, a place to start. And there's some suggested practices, simple practices that don't necessarily come out of any religious tradition, but are common to all of them. And when you start doing those, it's like it's almost effortless. It's not that much work. It's not a lot of spiritual practices like, all right, I have to sit on my cushion for 8 hours, or do, yoga every single day for 6 hours. No, that's not the way this is. What we found is that you can just write the word on a sticky note and stick it on your computer or your refrigerator or your mirror or all over your house, right? And if you keep that word in front of you, in some ways, it just sinks in. And before you know it, by the time you've gone through these words, you've changed. You have transformed because your awareness is now on these principles. So it's going to show up in your life. They're going to show up every day. These words will literally show up in your life every day if you're paying attention. Sometimes one is more highlighted than the other.
So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. We like science as well as the spiritual on the Aging Well podcast.
Mhm.
So how does modern science support the principles in your book? And are there studies or psychological concepts that align with these practices that you teach?
Absolutely. So that's one of the beauties of these words, right? Is that, these all came out of a mystical understanding. That's the root of all spirituality, is a mystical understanding. And what we're finding is that science is supporting what the mystics knew thousands of years ago. Let's take, for example, the importance of mindfulness in stress reduction, right? In physical health. We know there's tons of studies out there, right? On how mindfulness, how attention and contemplation, getting quiet are good for you physically, right? Balance. We know that when you're out of balance, you are going to suffer physically, mentally, emotionally. Kindness. What we've discovered is that kindness, benevolence, releases endorphins in the body, right? That make you feel good. Whether you are being kind to somebody else or somebody's kind to you. That's just part, we know this physically through science, that this is true. The universe, as scientists will tell us, is infinitely creative. It's in a constant state of creating, right? Quantum physicists, my son's an astrophysicist, so I actually understand a little right? And science, but that there's this constant arising and returning. Things are expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting. It's in a constant state of change and creativity. And everything is in collaboration with everything else. Science has shown us this. Again, I said, go into a forest. Understand how the trees communicate through the mycelial web, right? How the animals, like I live in the country, so I see this a lot. How, sometimes we have what they call mast years, where the oaks drop all their acorns. It's just tons and tons of acorns. Well, we get some fat squirrels, right? The reason that they need that is it's going to be a hard winter. So there's collaboration happening all the time and care. It's weird to say that there is a scientific premise for care. But if you look around in the world, you will see it everywhere. Everything is caring for everything else. So these are not separate from science. And you can go through these words without any spiritual orientation at all, and they'll still work. You don't have to be interested in the sacred or the divine. They're just universal principles.
So, what feedback have you received from early readers, and has it influenced how you approach sharing these ideas?
Like I said, when I first started working with these words, I shared them with a group of people, and we spent a year together going through them. All of us coming from different orientations, different places, different places on the path, right? And what we discovered is that by the end of it, almost effortlessly, we had transformed. We were happier. We were more joyful. We had more purpose. We had more peace in our lives. And that's the feedback that I get all the time. I get how practical it is from people. Like, this is so practical. And that's really important to me because there's a lot of spirituality that's like way out there, woo. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in what works, what keeps us grounded here, because here's where we are, right? This isn't about being focused on some afterlife, some idea of, where you're going to go when this is all over. It's here. And that's practical. So, that's a lot of the feedback I get is how practical it is and how easy. There's no I have to do this, I have to do that. It's almost like it's like osmosis. It just, once you get these words in your head, it's like it works like osmosis. And it's, if it's changed anything in the way that I present these, is to help people understand that this does not, you don't have to have any spiritual knowledge, right? This is your journey. I'm not defining the divine. I'm not telling you what is right or wrong. I'm saying here are principles. And if you explore these principles, you're going to discover your own truth, your own experience. And the beautiful thing is that it's not like you go through them once and you're done. You can go back round and round or pick one or whatever. You're going to find they show up. You don't even have to consciously do it, and that's the way I like to tell people is this is a practical spirituality. This is rooted. It's not woo-woo. It's rooted in what we know, right? And what we've been taught for thousands of years and what science and psychology are telling us now. And it's relevant. It's relevant to what's happening right now. It's relevant to your life. It's not something, far away. You don't have to wear robes and crawl on your knees and fast for 100 days. You don't have to do any of that. And that's, a lot of modern spirituality is like, you have to do these things. It's like, no, you don't. You just have to pay attention to these 10 words.
And one thing I'm picking up from this, it really fascinates me. And reading through the book, I'm seeing the same thing, that there's this continuity with it all that, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, as you get to care, it brings you back to acceptance, but then it brings you back through that whole cycle again. And I write a lot, and we talk a fair amount on this podcast about what I call well-centered fitness, and present it a little bit differently. My friend Jay, who will appreciate the call out again, because every time we mention him, he gets excited that he hears about us talking about him on the podcast, but he summarized everything. He pointed out that, every time you talk about these things, or, what I call the well-centered fitness, I always talk in the order of spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. He said, spelling out spies. And I'm like, I was never intentional about it. It just came out that way. But one thing I always speak of is like, it's an asymptote, that we're always going toward this thing, this being, this existence that is closer and closer to perfection, but we're never going to get to that perfection. But see the same thing, that this target just, as I talk about this being a target, that I can see we move through these 10 words, and each time to acceptance, we're a little bit closer to the center, and we just keep spiraling in toward the center. And so
exactly.
What advice do you have for our listeners on how they can integrate these 10 words into their daily routines, that we can maybe move toward that well-centeredness?
I love that idea of well-centeredness, right? Because this has the same concept, right? This is physical, emotional, spiritual. This is, all of this is at play here. This isn't just a head practice. It's not just a body practice. It's not just a, out there spiritual practice. So what I always suggest is, get the book, right?
Absolutely.
Because, it gives you a little bit of background on why each of these words are important, a lot more than I can just give you in a podcast, and some suggested practices and some reflection questions. But I like to say that, start with the first word and go through all the words one at a time, right? This isn't a book that you just sit down and read and just you're done, right? It's a book that, set aside a specific amount of time. A month is a good length of time for busy people, right? And it also gives time for these words to seep in, right? So a month for each word or a week, whatever feels right to you, right? Whatever feels right. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. And just go through word by word, and you'll see how almost effortlessly they bleed into the next one. Like you're working on paying attention, and then suddenly you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm having a hard time accepting what I'm paying attention to. And there you are, right? And there is no perfect. There is no perfect. We're always in the process of becoming. Always. And again, I mentioned, I'm I'm a chaplain. And even up to the end, we're still becoming. Always still. So if we can let go of this need to like get it once and for all and be done, it just doesn't work. Right? It just doesn't. We're just always working towards it, taking the next step towards it. And if, you'll see, once you start working with the words, you'll see they just become, I like to think of it as a map, really, or a structure or a framework, because it's really easy to get sidetracked. It's really easy to end up in the weeds somewhere, especially given how much information that we have out there regarding, spirituality or how to do our lives, right? It's really easy to sort of end up someplace else. These words give you like guardrails, they keep you from going off too far.
So what are some common obstacles people face in adopting these practices, and how can they effectively overcome them?
Well, the biggest obstacle is I don't want to, right? I don't want to. I think it's going to be hard. I don't have time. Those are the constant ones, right?
I mean, we hear
Ultimately,
that on our end with working out and exercise. So
absolutely. It's the same obstacles, right? Is that it does take a certain amount of effort, right? So there's the D section of the words, right? Which at the end of the book, after we go through the 10 words, there's the how do you keep doing this, right? And the D words are discipline. Ooh, everybody hates that word, right? Discipline. But it does take a certain amount of discipline. You have to say, I want to do this. I mean, the truth of the matter is we only do the things we want to do. Ever. Really, that we put the effort in when we want to do it. So you have to find your reason for wanting to do it. Do you want to be a better person in a better world? Do you want to have peace, purpose, joy? I don't know anybody who can answer no to that, but if they can, all right. So you find your reason, your why. And I can't tell you what that why is. You have to find it for yourself. So that's where some discipline comes in. Some days, you guys know if you're going to the gym or working out or whatever your fitness plan is, some days you just like, I just want to stay in bed. I don't want to get up and do this. You make yourself do it because it's important to you. Dedication. You keep going. And then devotion. So devotion is an interesting word. It's a word I struggled with for a long time. Being devoted to my path. What does that mean to be devoted? It means that you do it even when you don't want to do it. You do it because you love it. And coming to that place of love, I know working out, it's hard to come to that place of love, but once you're in that place of love, you want to keep doing it. So that's devotion.
I like that we're moving through the alphabet. Now we'll have to get to E. So to underscore all this, and I know you've touched on it a little bit already, but how are these teachings particularly relevant in our current global challenges that we're facing?
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
we only have about 2 days to finish this podcast, so.
Oh, yeah. This is the big question, right? And it's, what we're faced with. Again, I can say that, we've been struggling with this for thousands of years. And we go through cycles. We just happen to be in this part of this cycle. And, there's an ancient Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. Yeah. And I actually think of it as a blessing in the sense that when we live in interesting times, it asks something of us. It pushes us or pulls us or stretches us, right, into becoming people that we don't even know we can be, into a world that we don't even know whether it can happen, right? But we have to have some sense of trust. And I use the word trust rather than faith, because actually in the biblical Hebrew, what is often translated as faith in English, the word is emunah, and it means trust. And trust is different than faith because trust is based on something that you can see it happen. You develop trust, you earn trust, right? So we have to have trust. We have to have trust that if we can stick to the things that we know are right. I honestly can't say that there's a single one of these words that somebody could say, oh no, that's wrong, right? We know this is right. We know this is what helps us find peace with each other, right? Come to some understanding of how we can live on this beautiful planet together. And we need that. We need that more than ever right now because that's where we are. We're in a place where that's in question. In a lot of places in the world, including here at home, right? It's challenging. And if we allow ourselves to go into fear and greater division and greater anger and outrage and hate, we're not going to get very far. And we've been told that. We've been told that for thousands of years. You go that direction, it's not going to work out so well. So we need some guidelines. We need some ways to come back to what we know is right and we know is true. And that is pay attention, accept, be kind, try to keep things in balance, get quiet so the noise isn't overwhelming you. Use your creative imagination to bring something beautiful into the world. Collaborate with others. Celebrate, and take care. Take care with yourself, take care with others, take care of the world around you in whatever little way you can right now. You don't have to save the world, you can't. But you can take care of what's in front of you. And we have to.
Would you be willing to share any personal experience that has shaped your understanding of these 10 words and the book's message?
Well, I can say that since I've been working with these words, really, and I developed them for myself and then found that other people were like, oh, wow, these are great. I want to do it. So that's really where the book came from. Personally, I literally live these words. Like I said, right now, balance. And here's a personal story. I have my cat. We're going to talk about cats. All right, we're going to talk about cats. I have my cat. I have a feral mama cat that decided to gift me with 3 of her kittens. And she brought her boyfriend with her too. So I have 6 cats that I am literally trying to balance because they don't get along. And so it's like, okay, balance. How can I? And it's making me crazy, right? It's making me a little bit nuts because I've spent hours a day trying to manage these cats. I need balance. Need some moments of contemplation, quiet, where I can get quiet and hear, okay, what is the best way to deal with this? How do I deal with this right now so that I'm not becoming a crazy person? And I'm not ready to throw all the cats out and say nothing. I mean, it sounds mundane, but that's the beauty of these words, right? Is that these aren't lofty. that this is going to show up. And that's part of your spiritual. I like to say you're already on a spiritual path, whether you know it or not. It's called life. Life is the spiritual path. The fact that I now have to deal with 6 cats for the next few weeks until those kittens are old enough to be given to their forever homes, that's life. The boulder's the path, right? I have to apply these words because also what happens is because I'm up half the night because there's, cats making noise, but who knows, whatever. My temper gets short. I find myself out there in the world really having to work on acceptance, really having to work on benevolence, really having to work on care because I'm tired and I'm stressed out. Balance. That's what I mean. These are they're everywhere. They are everywhere.
All right. Well, since we're talking balance, let's ask you the question we ask of all of our guests. What are you doing personally to age well?
Oh, this practice, first of all. Second of all, really trying to stay in that wow, which is hard. It's really hard some days, to remind myself. And again, because I spend my work life with people at the end of life, how important it is to stay in that wow as long as you're breathing. Even if physically you may not be as healthy as you would like to be, I think that the real trick to aging well is wow. It's wow. And that's what I'm doing. That's really my focus these days.
So perhaps we should change the name of the podcast to the Aging Wow podcast.
But yeah. 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 I mean, wow, that there's podcasts.
Yeah.
And that you and I, we're having this conversation over, I have no idea where you are. It's not where I am. And I mean, wow, isn't that amazing? That keeps the mystery alive, right? It keeps the mystery of life alive.
Yeah.
So, Lauryn, how can our listeners connect with your work and engage in community initiative or community outreach that are related to your teachings?
Well, first of all, you can visit my website, laurynaxelrod.com. That's LaurynAxelrod.com. There's Facebook and Instagram. There's also, I write a Substack called Radical Spirituality that you can check out there. And, one of the things that's been marvelous about these words is, people get the book or they learn about the words and they say, hey, I want to do this. And then a group of their friends say, hey, I want to do this together. And creating little groups, study groups, practice groups, right? They're happening all over, small groups of people who are saying, hey, these are interesting. Let's do this together. And they're happening in everything from yoga centers to churches to just groups of people getting together on Zoom to do it. I've got a friend who's combining it with tarot. It's, there's all kinds of ways that you can engage with these words. And I do, I don't guarantee much, but I will guarantee this. If you genuinely go through these words, practice, things will transform. You will find yourself more peaceful, more purposeful, more joyful, becoming a better person in a better world. And if the more of us do it, the better off we all are.
Well, Lauryn, this has been an absolutely uplifting conversation. My head's spinning thinking, okay, how am I going to incorporate some of this into my daily journaling practices and meditative practices and so on? I thank you for joining us. Is there anything we've missed? Do you have any final words for our listeners and viewers?
No, I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share these 10 words. And I love how, in the process of aging well, we can't forget our spiritual side. That's part of it.
Yep.
Right. And I love that you've got this holistic view. So And remembering that these 10 words are holistic. They cover body, mind, and spirit. All the ways that we can age well.
And to our listeners out there who've been on this journey with us for a while and really appreciate our SPIES terminology, if you love Lauryn's 10 pillars and you're interested in that, we'll be more than happy to put a hyperlink to her book in our description below. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And always remember to keep aging well.
Or aging well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.